My manager humiliated me in a meeting, and 5 minutes later, the board called my name. Not his, mine. And the wildest part, I didn't defend myself. I just sat there and let him bury himself with his own mouth. Because in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't speaking to HR. He was performing. And he had no idea the real audience was already watching. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 31. And for 3 years, I was the person who made our department look competent. Not by being loud, by being reliable. The kind of reliable nobody celebrates until it's gone. I worked at a mid-sized company that handled enterprise accounts. Onboarding, compliance, training, performance reporting, the boring stuff that decides whether a client stays or walks. Our biggest client was a national healthcare group. If they left, the company would feel it instantly. Payroll stressed instantly. Everyone knew it. That account had its own gravity, and I was the one assigned to it. Not because I begged for it, because when it was a mess, I cleaned it. When it was calm, I kept it calm. I didn't just manage the account. I knew their execs' names, their timelines, their pain points, their internal politics, the legal sensitivities, the things they didn't even want written down. I built systems so our team wouldn't drop the ball. I wrote the playbook. I trained the new hires. I built the reporting templates my VP used in board updates without ever mentioning who built them. And I was fine with that because I believed in one simple deal. If you do the work, you eventually get the recognition. I learned the hard way. That's not a deal. That's a fairy tale. My manager's name was Brian Whitaker. He was the kind of guy who dressed like a promotion. Always polished, always confident, always busy. Busy doing what? Mostly he talked. He talked in meetings, he talked in Slack, he talked in performance reviews. He talked his way into visibility and talked his way out of responsibility. We had quarterly promotion cycles. I'd been passed over twice. The first time they told me, it's just timing. The second time, Brian told me, you're incredible, but we need you where you are. You're too critical to move. I remember staring at him like, did you really just say my biggest strength is the reason you won't reward me? He smiled like it was a compliment. Then came the third cycle. By then, I had receipts, not petty receipts, real ones. The client had emailed me directly. Ethan, thank you for saving this rollout. You're the only reason our leadership didn't escalate. I had metrics showing renewal risk dropped after I rebuilt their onboarding workflow. I had internal feedback from two directors recommending me for the senior role. I had years of work documented. So when I submitted my promotion packet, I thought, okay, this time it's automatic. Brian scheduled a meeting titled Career Growth Discussion. That title alone should have warned me, because when a company wants to give you growth, they don't call it a discussion. They just give it to you. The meeting was in conference room C, glass walls, a whiteboard with faded marker stains from some old strategy session nobody finished. There were 3 people besides Brian, HR, 2 directors, and me, sitting there with my notebook like a fool, still thinking we were adults. Brian started strong, big smile, hands open like he was about to award me something. Ethan's performance has been solid, he said. Solid. That word hit my chest like a slap. Solid is what you call someone you don't want to promote, but you also don't want to lose. Then he leaned back, casual, and said, however, there have been concerns about Ethan's readiness for leadership. I blinked. Concerns. My body went cold. One director looked confused. HR lifted their pen like this was normal. Brian continued, Ethan sometimes struggles with strategic thinking and tends to get lost in details. I almost laughed, because the details were the only reason we still had our biggest client. Then he said the thing he thought would crush me. And there's been feedback that Ethan can be difficult, a little intense, not always a team player. I stared at him. Difficult? Intense? Team player? I trained half the team. I covered weekends. I rewrote processes so other people could look good doing work that used to fall apart. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, and I wanted to speak. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to list every late night, every emergency, every time I saved a project Brian didn't even understand. But I didn't, because something clicked in my head, sharp and clear. He's not saying this because it's true. He's saying it because it's useful. This wasn't feedback. This was a story he needed the room to accept so he could keep me exactly where I was. So I asked one question, calmly. Can you share specific examples? Brian smiled, like I'd stepped right into his trap. Sure, he said. For example, the healthcare account's last rollout had issues, and Ethan didn't escalate early enough. One of the directors frowned, because we all knew what he had just done. He had blamed me for something the board was already looking at. That rollout had been audited, not by us, by the client, a formal complaint. And I remembered that week perfectly. I had begged Brian, in writing, not to commit to the date he promised. I had warned him. I had sent a risk summary. And he had replied, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." He didn't. I did. I worked 3 nights in a row to keep the client from walking. And now he was rewriting history in a glass room like he was the victim. Brian looked around the table like he'd won. HR nodded. The directors exchanged a glance, uneasy. And then Brian went for the kill. He tapped my promotion packet. "Ethan's work is good," he said, "but it's execution. It's not leadership. And frankly, we need leaders right now." Then he laughed, short, dismissive. "And Ethan, I know you work hard, but working hard isn't the same as being promotable." That's when my hands went numb. Not from sadness, from rage. But I kept my face neutral. I closed my notebook, and I said quietly, "Understood." Brian looked satisfied, like he'd just put me in my place. Then the meeting ended. People filed out. The directors didn't look me in the eye. HR gave me that fake sympathy smile people use when they want to feel like they're not part of the cruelty. Brian stopped me at the door and lowered his voice like he was giving me wisdom. "Don't take it personally. Just keep grinding. Your time will come." I nodded, and I walked back to my desk like I'd swallowed glass. I sat down, opened my email, and stared at the screen for a long time, because I wasn't devastated anymore. I was clear. They weren't going to promote me, not because I wasn't ready, because it wasn't convenient, because my work kept the ship from sinking, and Brian wanted to stay the hero. So I did the only thing that made sense. I stopped rescuing them. Not by sabotaging, not by being petty. I just did my job. My actual job. Nothing extra. No invisible unpaid overtime. No emergency calls on weekends. No covering other people's messes. If something needed approval, I asked for approval. If something needed escalation, I escalated. If something was outside scope, it stayed outside scope. I became exactly what my job description said, and it was terrifying how fast the cracks showed. Within a week, the healthcare client sent a message. "We're seeing inconsistencies again. Who is overseeing this?" Brian jumped in, tried to charm them, tried to smooth it over, but he didn't know the moving parts, and for once, I didn't step in to make him look smarter than he was. 2 days later, their compliance lead emailed me directly. "Ethan, can we get 15 minutes? We're concerned." I booked the meeting, and for the first time, I didn't protect Brian. I just told the truth. Professional truth. Clean truth. "I can stabilize this," I said, "but decision-making has been inconsistent. I've flagged risks in writing. They weren't addressed." I didn't name Brian. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I just described reality. The compliance lead went quiet. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "Ethan, the board is reviewing this account. They requested a briefing tomorrow. Can you join?" I felt my throat tighten. "The board?" "Yes," she said. "They specifically asked for you." I hung up and stared at my calendar, because now I understood. Brian didn't just block my promotion. He lied in a meeting while the people above him were already watching. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number.
I answered, "Ethan, this is Elena from the board office. We have a short slot tomorrow at 10:30. Can you attend?" My mouth went dry. "Yes," I said. The next morning, I showed up in the same clothes I always wore. Nothing flashy, no board meeting outfit, just me. Because I learned something in corporate life. When you're actually valuable, you don't need a costume to prove it. I walked into a larger conference room on the executive floor, and there was Brian, sitting near the wall, trying to look confident, but his jaw was tight. His leg bounced under the table like a metronome. Board members were seated. The CEO was there, legal was there, and a woman I didn't recognize until she introduced herself as the client's senior compliance director. The air felt heavy. The CEO gestured to a chair. "Ethan, thank you for coming." Brian's eyes flicked to me. I sat down. Elena said, "We're going to keep this focused. Ethan, walk us through the account status and what caused the recent issues." Brian cleared his throat like he was going to speak. A board member lifted a hand without even looking at him. "No." Then he repeated, calm and cold, "We asked for Ethan." Brian's face tightened, and I swear I could hear my own blood moving. I spoke calmly. I explained the workflow, the handoffs, the timeline, the risk flags, the specific moments approvals were required. Then I did the thing Brian didn't expect. I didn't speak emotionally. I didn't say, "I warned him." I opened my laptop and I showed them the email thread, subject line, dates, my risk summary, Brian's response, and I watched the client compliance director's expression change in real time. She leaned forward. "Scroll," she said. I scrolled. There it was. Brian had promised something we couldn't legally do without a compliance waiver, a waiver he never obtained, a promise that forced the failure. The room went silent.
Then the compliance director said slowly, "So the issue wasn't execution." She turned her eyes to Brian. "It was misrepresentation." Brian opened his mouth, and nothing came out. The CEO's face turned to stone. One of the board members looked at me and asked, "Ethan, in your professional opinion, can this account be stabilized?" "Yes," I said, "if leadership stops overpromising and allows the process to work." That was all. No drama, no insults, just truth. They thanked me. I stood up. As I reached the door, Elena stopped me. "Ethan, please wait outside for a moment." I waited in the hallway. I couldn't hear words through the door, just tension. 10 minutes later, Elena stepped out and closed it behind her. "They want to speak with you privately." I walked back in. Brian was gone. His chair was empty. The CEO motioned for me to sit. "Ethan," he said, "I'm going to be direct. We reviewed your promotion packet, we reviewed the account documentation, and we reviewed the feedback used to deny your promotion." He paused. "And it doesn't match the reality we're seeing." A board member spoke next. "We're creating a new role, Client Operations Lead for Strategic Accounts." My heart pounded. "You'll report directly to director level, not through Brian." Then he said the words I didn't expect to hear. "We'd like you to take it." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I nodded once. "Yes," I said. And here's what surprised me most. I didn't feel victorious. I felt corrected, like something that had been wrong for a long time finally got put back where it belonged. A week later, an internal email went out. Leadership restructuring. Brian's name wasn't mentioned, just gone. Badge access ended. Email auto-replied, and people pretended they didn't notice. But everyone noticed. The healthcare client renewed. They asked for me in every meeting, not because I demanded it, because trust isn't built with charisma, it's built with consistency. And after all of that, after the humiliation, after the lie, after the board meeting, Brian tried to message me on LinkedIn. One sentence. "No hard feelings. You were always talented."
I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because when someone shows you they'll crush you to protect their ego, you don't owe them closure. You owe yourself standards. Now I work in that role. I'm respected, I'm paid what I'm worth, and I don't beg anyone to see me, because the right people always do, eventually. So let me ask you, if your manager humiliated you in public and you had the receipts to prove you weren't the problem, would you stay quiet and play nice? Or would you let the truth speak for you? Drop your verdict in the comments. Like and subscribe, because here, one story always leads to another.